Welcome to episode 3 of the What is Wrong with Your Overwatch League Team Series 2020 edition. Now usually I try to keep these types of videos dedicated towards teams who are really struggling, but sometimes I try to make some exceptions. Today happens to be one of those times. This episode is all about the Seoul Dynasty because I can't seem to get them off my mind given how strange they've been this year. In case this is the first time you're watching me, here's a quick rundown of how this series tends to work. So what I try to do is bring up some of the issues as to why I believe a team I'm talking about is struggling. After doing this, I want to bring up some potential solutions to those problems that I would consider pursuing if I was the one in charge. There's no guarantee that any of my solutions would make a difference, but at the end of the day, I figure that trying to come up with answers is a better idea than doing absolutely nothing about it, you know? We gotta figure out what the Dynasty can do to improve as a team moving forward. And of course, to all my Dynasty fans watching, please remember that this is nothing but tough love. I mean, no hate whatsoever. I don't have to tell you of all people that it is incredibly frustrating to watch the Dynasty. And that's why I believe it is a good idea to talk about it. Instead of ignoring it, let's put our brains together to see what we can think of to maybe change the situation a little bit, you know? With explanations and intros aside though, let's dive right into this thing. I know I'm not the only person who feels this way, but the Dynasty have been quite the strange team. Taking a look at their record, they aren't in a terrible spot. They currently sit at 10th place with a 6-5 record. At a glance, that's not too shabby. They're like middle of the pack. But then you start thinking a little deeper and suddenly the situation becomes way worse. First of all, their map differential is -5, so right away we can figure out that they're only scraping by with some of their wins while also getting destroyed anytime they lose. Not to mention that the only reason they have a positive record in the first place is because they got hot at the right time during the May Melee. Take away their second place finish along with those 2 bonus wins, and now they're 4-5 in standard regular season play. That would give them as many wins as the likes of Houston and Chengdu. So right away we can come to the conclusion that their overall performance on the season could be a bit deceiving. So now we have to ask the question, what is wrong with this year's version of the Seoul Dynasty? Well, it's probably a good idea to address the glaring issue of their inconsistencies. That's easily the biggest underlying theme with Seoul currently. They couldn't maintain a good pace even if it killed them. The Dynasty are in a vicious and seemingly unbreakable cycle. One week we praise them and say just how amazing they are, then the next they get absolutely bodied. Apologies if you don't understand this reference or watch the NFL, but the Dynasty remind me of the 2019 LA Rams. Their seasons are practically identical. One week they'll be contenders, then the next pretenders. Last year the Rams started their season 3-0, but then they lost their next 3. Then the cycle kind of kept just going and going from there, and it got to the point where they ultimately missed out on the playoffs. They couldn't go on a winning streak without going on a losing streak right after. Doesn't that seem kind of similar to a certain team that wears black and gold? Don't pull a Rams dynasty. Don't do it. The point I'm trying to make though is no matter who the opponent, Seoul will pop off one week, then collapse against whoever comes next. They could beat Shanghai one week, then lose to Chengdu the next. It doesn't matter. It's not a sustainable way to play out your season, and it's only going to lead to a very, very tough road to the playoffs later on. It goes without saying that you have to be able to defeat the teams that you should be beating on paper. I'm not even a Dynasty fan, and I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating it is to watch them play. It's like a dice roll or something. Roll odds and they're going to dominate. Roll evens and they're the ones getting dominated. But why? Why are they like this? They have a pretty good roster, do they not? Well, I personally think a huge problem for them is not being able to get a proper grasp on the meta. We've seen Echo give them a real hard time. One week we see them crush the Spark, but then the next, Echo comes in and they look lost against the same team. Next thing you know, Echo is banned and they take down the Shanghai Dragons now. Then Echo comes back into play the following week and they get rolled by Chengdu of all teams. But then all of a sudden, Echo's not a problem anymore as they beat the Spark and Charge in the May Melee while pushing the Dragons to their limit. It's a meta thing with them for sure. They are very slow learners. Prophet, Gesture, and Podoshin suffered from similar problems during their years on London. That's the one thing that seems to remain consistent with Seoul. Meta shifting hurts them badly at first. Their game against New York that ultimately became the final straw for me is evidence of this. I expected them to look comfortable this week. Double Shield was set to be powerful. Echo and Sombra were banned. This was the ideal scenario, and they were coming off a good tournament run, so at least giving New York a decent fight felt realistic. But how did they repay me? By going back in time to before the May Melee. Once again, they don't know what they're doing. I know Dive was used a decent amount over the weekend, but Seoul running it against something that hard counters it is not ideal. New York knew what to play. They did a ton of bunker comps, and essentially it made Seoul's strategy worthless. Playing Winston Zarya into what New York was using was not the play. It was essentially Gesture jumping in and dying by himself like more than half the time. With there being no diva in play, all you have is a Zarya bubble, and once you break that bubble used to protect the diving Winston, he is totally exposed. So New York kind of just grouped up together with Orisa, Sigma, and Mei and kept insta-melting him. They even threw in a Roadhog for good measure at times, and that only added onto the crowd control. It's sad too, because Seoul were oftentimes just bashing their heads into a wall over and over again. Why they refused to swap is something I can't quite comprehend. Like, why keep doing it? It didn't work when you tried it on Oasis, and it failed even harder on their Hollywood attack. They simply got hard countered in every way possible. The NYXL were far more disciplined. They understood what to run a lot better. What makes the situation even more infuriating is that Seoul did pretty well when they actually played what they should have been playing from the start. They had a few good holds on Hanamura and Hollywood. Both of those maps were quite winnable, but Seoul kept wanting to play those games, man. Why they decided to play dive on Hollywood until the final 30 seconds of their attack is beyond me, and they paid the price for it. A full hold on that map put them down 2-0, and on Hanamura, they actually started playing the right thing, but at that point, it was already too late. They were mentally boomed at that point, and the NYXL had them right where they wanted them. Again, I'm not even a Seoul fan, keep that in mind, and yet I was absolutely tilted over what they were doing. They literally did fine on Double Shield, so why on earth did they keep referring back to something that wasn't working? Double Shield is what Seoul excels at too. We've known this for a while now. Gesture and Marvel on the Orisa Sigma is their strongest combo, no doubt. The team in general just looks really comfortable with that slower pace. Going quick with Winston has not worked for them all year. After the stunt they pulled over the weekend, I'm convinced that coaching is a problem. It doesn't matter the year. The Dynasty continue to get hurt by bizarre coaching. This is their third coach in what, like 3 years? And yet they still get hindered by the same problems. Why is it that every head coach they sign has some sort of weird philosophy? What made them think that Zarya dive was the play? Like, what's the deal? You know your team is confident on bunker, and you're heading into a strong bunker meta. Instead of playing up to your biggest strength, you decide to risk it on something more out of your comfort zone against a team that will absolutely destroy you 10 times out of 10 if you don't play perfectly. This is the type of stuff you run against a weak team in the region, not against the NYXL. The Seoul coaching staff has to be smarter than this. I know it's important to improve on other stuff so you aren't double shield one tricks or anything like that, but you have to play what works. And if that happens to be double shield, you don't question it. You just embrace it every single time. Don't put yourself at a dumb disadvantage like this. The coaches need to learn from something like this. And if it continues, then it's time to find someone else to take the reins. I know it's not always easy to find coaching replacements mid-season, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Game planning isn't the only thing that worries me about the coaching though. I don't know how much of it is their responsibility exactly, but I'm still not a fan of them transitioning Marvel into an off-tank player. Don't get me wrong, when Seoul play Orisa Sigma, I have no problem with this. Marvel is a great Sigma player, so you want him in the game if I'm going to be honest, but when the meta goes in a different direction, it's not the play. He should not be on Diva or Zarya. This is not his natural position, so why force him to change? Is Michelle washed up? Is he maybe not gelling together with the rest of the team? Does Marvel provide better comms? What's the reason? Do you really even need Marvel in for comms that badly when you have Badoshin, Toby, and Gesture in there already? It all seems pretty fishy to me. The tank situation in general, though, is another problem I look at as to why Seoul is struggling so much. It goes beyond the coaching. Maybe Michelle deserves another chance. He hasn't played much this year. If not, it's time for Seoul to get a new off-tank player. The current system is not very efficient, and it's way too meta-dependent. You cannot expect to win a lot of games with this current tank situation. Marvel at off-tank seems to be a problem, but Gesture and the overall synergy are as well. Whenever the Dynasty play dive, it looks like a train wreck. Gesture going in and straight up feeding happens far too often. Either there are some major communication issues or Marvel cannot do his job right. Probably a little bit of both of them, going to be honest. Gesture gets pummeled every single time though, that's all I know. It's not all their fault, but Gesture and Marvel are not having a great season. Marvel is kind of in an unfamiliar role, and Gesture can only find success on the Orisa. His Winston has severely fallen off, and the Reinhardt is no better than it used to be. The tanks need to be straightened out, like, right now. Seoul is in quite the predicament because of them. They need Gesture for the synergy with Prophet and Badoshin, it would seem, but he hasn't been consistently reliable. But if you want to get the most out of Michelle, then you need to pair him up with Marvel, but now the two of them are a bit out of practice for obvious reasons. The Dynasty have dug themselves into a hole, and I really want them to make a decision. If Orisa Sigma is not meta or it's not what you plan to play, then make some changes as to who plays at tank. Either that, or really work on that communication so you can step it up and not have people feed so much. Learn some better discipline. The other problem I have with the Dynasty that I wanted to talk about in this video is their style. They need to figure out what they want to do with it. Do they want to become more aggressive, or do they want to continue to play more patiently like we've seen in the past? Right now, it seems like they might be interested in becoming more aggressive, as they were playing a lot of dive, like I said, and they put Slime in for a map in that NYXL game. In the past, they've always been a very passive team, and it's found mixed results, so maybe this is a good shakeup for them to become more aggressive. But I think making a decision on who they plan to utilize at main support could help with this change. With how inconsistent they've been, I really wouldn't be opposed to them experimenting at this point. Main support is the least of their concerns right now, but it's something they eventually have to figure out. They played Slime for one map against New York over the weekend, then put Toby in for the rest. Toby has actually been having a pretty decent season, but I can't help but feel like Slime might be the way to go if the Dynasty are set on trying to increase the tempo. That's why you brought this guy in after all, right? Slime literally said he wants to help make this team more aggressive, so I say give him the chance to do so. And if it doesn't work out, then you can always go back to having Toby playing full time, or you can make Slime a map specialist. With them being in the hunt for a playoff spot, I would usually be opposed to messing around with stuff, but after how they played against the NYXL, it would seem they've already started to experiment, and again, with how they've been playing all this year, you might as well go for it. It's not too late to change. I've said this with Toronto and Boston already, but try and find what works for you, Seoul Dynasty. Once you do, stick with it and build up your confidence. If you plan to compete for a championship, you can't ignore your problems. Nothing will change. The same inconsistency that's plagued this franchise for their entire existence will continue to haunt them. This team should be better than this. There's no other way around it. At their peak, they can compete with pretty much anyone. We've already witnessed them play the Dragons close 2 times, and one of those times they beat them. We've seen them clutch out some close games before. These guys have what it takes to be respectable, but they have such crazy highs and lows. If they even start to falter a little bit, it all falls apart. It's like the moment they lose a map, they decide to give up. Their mental is too weak. That in itself you could consider an underlying problem that has to be resolved. Lots of their players have a history with these types of struggles. Toby's been dealing with it for 3 years on Seoul now, and the former London players this team owns suffer from it too. It's always been a weakness of theirs. When they are winning or they feel confident in their own abilities, everything is fine. But the moment there is a smidge of doubt, everything blows up into a million pieces. You have to learn that this mindset will only get you so far. You have to stay strong. Hopefully Seoul can learn this over time. Well, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about Seoul. As you can see, there's a handful of problems they need to work on fixing in my opinion. I know they can be so much more than this, like I really do, I just know they can. It's unbelievably frustrating to watch them be this way, and that's coming from a non-Seoul fan. I'm sure you guys feel a million times worse than I do, and I'm sorry it has to be this way. With that said though, that's going to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of this series. If you did, then I would appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you're new. I also encourage you to let me know what you think is wrong with the Dynasty, as well as what you think they can do to improve down in the comment section so we can continue the discussion. While you're at it, tell me what team you'd like me to talk about next, and consider following my Twitter, joining the Discord, and becoming a channel member to further support me. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.